Yo, yo, yo. What's happening, everyone? It is the Goodman Factory podcast, live and direct. We are in the building. Glad to have everyone listening in. If it's your first time listening in, you are due a wonderful education. If you've been following us from the jump, please continue to do so. Just want to give a big shout out for those that may not know. Recently, it was Goodman's first year birthday. So please, everyone, just, thank you to everyone within the Goodman Factory community. Like that. And all them things there. Obviously, for everyone that's been following us from the jump, be it the podcast, be it in the community and buying products, please continue to do so. We appreciate you. But we're going to crack on. We're going to get straight into it. There are always, at Goodman Factory, we always, encourage speaking about topics that affect us as men, that affect us as black men, topics as well that affect just men, period. Especially living in, the UK and the myriad of different, topics and things that affect us. And today we're going to be discussing the topic of parental discipline. What parental discipline, meant for us growing up, how aspects of parental discipline have shaped our mindsets for those of us that have kids, for those of us that don't, in terms of how they approach certain things based on things that they were taught, what actually discipline means. Because, as individuals, we all fundamentally have different views on one topic. And it's one of the things that makes human beings great. We can always have a similar mindset, but somehow have diverging opinions about these things. So today we have got Goodman Ade, we have got Goodman Tolu. Obviously, I just want the camera real quick to just quickly head to Brad Tolu because he's only person that's wearing Versace sunglasses. Is it Versace? Is that Versace?
I wasn't ready.
Yeah, you don't need to be ready. See, he's even licking his lips to be prepared. He's even getting Maltesers, shaking it like granuts. Yes, like continue. But thanks. But look, thanks to both of you guys for coming in. So I guess the real question that we should ask is, what does discipline mean to you? So I guess I'll start. Discipline to me is ideally what I view as a certain kind of doctrine or mindset that you adhere to that allows you to maintain focus. And obviously regarding parental discipline, obviously I'm not a father, so I can't speak on that with a certain level of eloquence or nuance that that fathers would. But obviously when Goodman Tolu speaks, obviously he will have a lot more context and so on and so forth. But growing up in a Nigerian household regarding things like discipline, it was very, very much a case of having Nigerian parents sort of, is my way or the highway, pretty much. And there's very little choice. You can't say otherwise, Obviously, living with my parents and growing up with my mum, in particular, she was someone who was always, working hard, managing me. And boy, when I was a kid, yeah, I was definitely not the easiest of kids to deal with and raise. After time, I don't even know how most of my mates deal with me now, to be honest. Before we even started this pod, Malik was wanting to break my head for consistent insubordination. Love you, bros. But I feel like growing up, in terms of like discipline, it's coming from obviously from that kind of house and that environment. It's quite a rigid structure. It's not a case of things aren't necessarily open to debate. So if it's a case of, someone says to you, you cannot do this, asking why, you're just opening up another issue of headache. But I feel like as I'm older now and I look back at the parenting styles of my parents to a degree, I feel like there are certain aspects that I absolutely could adopt, perhaps, when it comes to, me having kids. But I'd like to think there are also certain things that I can adapt and ideally, like, not do. You know, I definitely, you know, when I was a kid, yeah, I used to get smacks. Like it's obviously I don't want to say, I don't want to generalize and say that it's kind of like synonymous with discipline in an African household, but I'd be hard pressed if anyone here says that when they were growing up that they didn't get their ass whooped from time to time. Probably some more than others, because yeah. so, so you know, so that's definitely, you know, a thing. So yeah.
Question: what's your what's the most memorable thing you got beats with?
No. I can't answer that question. I can't answer that question with confidence. I can't. Anyway, I'm grown anyway. Fuck it. I'm grown now. Oh boy. What did I get beat with?
You remember? Just stop playing. You remember?
Obviously, man's not trying to throw parents in under the bus in that, innit?
I'm sure the statute of limitations passed. I'm sure.
No. Bruv, I think it was just pretty much whatever could potentially get their hands on, bruv. That's just
was not a favorite.
Yeah, there was never like, you know some people you go for slipper, you know, no. I'm getting whooped with whatever. Wooden spoon, yeah. Slipper, yeah. Cane, yeah. Beds, yeah.
Bro,
you know what though? You know one thing I will definitely say, when it comes to punishments, not even beyond just the whole thing of beating, I promise you, nobody is more creative than Nigerians at punishing people. Ha ha ha.
It's not a punishment, it's training.
It's training.
It's training.
I won't lie to you. There was one punishment. Yeah, I remember. Yeah, it was called sewing machine. So obviously, basically you're just literally like squatting, non-stop. I think in Yoruba they call it something, but I don't remember. I don't remember off the top of my head. But it was literally called sewing machine. So literally, you got your hands on your ears. I was just literally doing up and down. Like you will sweat, you will lose the will to live. But I'm not gonna lie. People see my legs now and they think that they do NFL, bruv. So, you know, in hindsight, it kind of worked.
I had to do the same thing, but across the room. And you just keep 2 hours past, 2.5 hours past.
I remember one punishment. It was brutal. It was called the cross. So basically, yeah, you kneel down, yeah. You'll be kneeling down, and then you would literally be having one shoe in one hand, one shoe in the other, and you'll be kneeling.
Man said that's where the deltoids came from. Yeah.
Fam, listen, fam. See all the triceps and that muscle memory for real, because you be holding it like this. They don't bond you out, let you move. What?
Why did you call it training?
Because really, like a lot of the like physical parts of it, strengthful. Like some of it didn't really. Like the hopping, storing down, sewing machine. Those things were literally working your muscles, and that's what the pain was coming from. In those senses, I feel like those are not as bad as beating. But I think the reason my experience of beating is an interesting one, and the reason I asked the question I asked is, for me, there's one memorable item. 2, let me not lie. And it was just like, I don't know if you remember, but there was a point in secondary school where people had these like rubber pencils.
Yeah.
And then you would be able to get like the 1 meter or the 1.5 meter one. And my sister used to love them, and they were in the house. There was one time, and then at the end was a bit of metal where the rubber would be.
Yeah.
This one, the rubber had gone, so it was just that sharp metal end.
Oh, yeah. I already know where this is going. Oh, no.
I couldn't do P for a couple of weeks, man.
I feel you.
What would you call that? Training?
I would call that, and this is something I'll get onto, I'll call that the mismanagement of emotions. Because in that situation, the parent can't manage the child's emotion well enough to figure out what's going on, and they can't manage their own emotion well enough to deal with their anger in a way that isn't on the child.
Yeah. And it leads to an excessive use of force.
Because for me, one thing that I did in those situations, I've always been like a very inquisitive person. So one thing I did in those situations, I would always think like, do I actually think I deserved this much of a punishment or this type of a punishment? And the answer for me would always be, sometimes it was yes, but most of the time it would be no. And then I would have to look at myself and be like, okay, cool, what's actually at play here? Someone is so angry, but it's a busy person who has no time. and that anger is going to be unleashed out of them. They're also from a culture that shows them that that's an okay way to discipline people. So they're going to do that. And in my mind, it got me to understand that, okay, cool. It's not that this person hates me. They've essentially been socialized to respond to things in this way. Now they're in a circumstance that doesn't allow them to take advantage of this new environment and be exposed to things because they're just working hard. They barely have time. So for me, I was still understanding of it growing up, even though it was still like, this does not feel right.
Do you think to a degree, a large part of that comes from a lack of emotional intelligence on the part of our parents and potentially older siblings?
I think I'm going to say yes. Yeah. Not all parents, but I'm going to say yes. Yeah. I'm going to say not in a judgmental, it's not a judgmental yes.
Yeah.
It's more of it's a compassionate yes, because it's a yes in understanding that
they disciplined how they disciplined us, and we were raised how they were raised. So
this is the thing, not necessarily for a lot of us, we were raised a little bit more leniently than they were raised. Like for many of our parents, what they've done to us is not as much as what was done to them. And this is one thing I think a lot of us, it's very easy to forget because most parents don't rub it in your face and say, or even if they do, it's not like in your face all the time.
Yeah.
That I got this, I got that, But yeah, I'll get onto the other memorable thing though, because it's genuinely a story that I've learned to love telling.
I'm hooked.
But the second item.
Oh yeah.
The second item was a heel.
Yes, sir. We getting into the domestic abuse now.
Whoa.
That's the word. No, but that's the word I was looking for. When do we call it abuse?
But this
we're dancing around it. But when do we say, this was abuse?
But this is the thing. I'll get onto, and the reason why I'm rolling it in this way, on purpose. The second item was a heel, and that heel was used to crack my skull. Skull crack, healed. Life moves on. You learn the lesson. And the thing I was even in trouble for is something in that moment I actually didn't do. So for me, it was the way it unrolled was interesting.
I need you to tell me, once you've explained, I need you to tell me the apology that was given to you.
What apology, bro?
But
to be fair, in all honesty, years after, like more and more things happened until we reached an end pass. And it got to a point where I really told my mum, I was pissed and I wasn't going to hide it anywhere. And I told her, sit down on the floor in my room. And I was sat in a chair and I told her, this, and outlined experiences and outlined my perspective on them. And then outlined even things that externally look great. She'd be like, oh yeah, my friends say, oh yeah, he's so responsible. He's so this, he's so that. The reason I'm so responsible is because I had to do all this trauma development. I call it trauma development because it's not growth.
Agreed.
Like all this trauma development and learn how to be far more mature than I needed to be to survive in environments that I didn't need to be in. So it's not, and until we had that, then it really became a thing of understanding that this is a relationship of give and take. And I was lucky that it was pretty much something happened that pushed me over an edge. And at that point I realized that, okay, life really is give and take, but you have to decide what you're willing to give
and what you're willing to take.
Yeah. Even with your parents. And I think that is the real key of discipline. Understanding that life is give and take, but you have to decide what you're willing to give and what you're willing to take. I think that's like the foundation of it. Interestingly, years pass. My mum's in church now, and they're talking about discipline. And other parents are standing up saying, yeah, you should beat your kids. It helps them. Yeah, that's how cool. It says, spare the rod, spoil the child. And my mum stood up. And this time I was thinking, here's another one that's going to add to it. And she stood up and she was like, I just want to say beating kids doesn't work. I've been beating this child for, at this point, over 10 years. And only when I sit down and talk to him is when things change. Everything I've ever beat him for, he has done at least once after I beat him. So if the beating was going to stop him from doing it, he would have only ever done everything he did. He would have only ever done once. The only time he did something once, and we spoke, and he never did it again. It was speaking, not beating. I was like, wow. People can learn. People can change.
I must have rattled the whole church. Like
it rattled me because my first response.
Yeah, word. Because what you were expecting and what you actually heard were completely two different things.
My first response was like, wow, okay. Is it? yeah, bro, not you defending. Imagine, bro.
I would have exposed her.
Nah.
No, I'm not joking.
It's a Nigerian church. Exposed. What am I gonna say?
Yeah, what are you gonna
No,
expose?
she beats
I've
children.
been sent out from a church before. I'm not going to just hold my tongue for anybody because, like I said, it gets to a point where it's like, okay, cool, you're punishing me.
Yeah.
Because you're angry.
Yeah.
You're transferring that anger onto me.
Yeah.
And now I'm taking that anger outside. Then I'm getting into trouble, coming back and getting beaten again, and the cycle continues. And then I have to stop and say to myself, okay, when do I say that what you did was abusive? And that created, like you said, a lasting trauma that I had to grow out of, had to educate myself, then try to educate you on why you shouldn't be doing that. And in an environment like that, you're now saying, okay, cool, I don't think beating works. That lets me know that you know what you was doing was wrong, or you've looked back in hindsight and said what I did, my approach was wrong, but where was my apology?
That's what I was gonna say.
Yeah.
Because my first reaction in hearing it in that room was,
hang on,
when did you realize this? A, and B, it better have been in the car for you have not to have apologized. So you've realized actually, that beating was wrong. I shouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
And this is the first I'm hearing of it.
But did she apologize?
After that conversation, which was years after her even saying that in church, was like second year uni when I came back for the summer.
Yeah.
After that conversation, then some apologies for some things have been given. I remember the last conversation we had about apologies was a more firm, everything I did was out of love, even if it had negative effects. I didn't do anything negative because all I did was
I would say,
exactly
miss me.
Exactly.
Apologize properly.
You know what that looks like. This is African parents not taking accountability for their shit. Okay,
but
that's what that is. That's basically what that is. And it's funny that you mentioned that because that particular kind of situation kind of happened to me when I was in secondary school. So
let me just say, I don't want to drop my mum in it because she is actually a really nice person.
Yeah.
So even though she hasn't apologized in word per se for everything, through her actions, the apology is more than, and this is the thing, more than profound. That's why I can accept it. It's not like, oh yeah, no, I'm acting good now, forget everything.
Yeah,
like she definitely goes out of her way to do things she really does not have any business trying to do for me.
Yeah.
And I understand where that's coming from. And I find myself a lot of the time now like, we're cool. Like you don't have to do this. You don't have to do that.
So
we're like,
from
we're
a place
okay.
of guilt maybe, or a place of love?
A place of retribution, a place of not even
seeking
guilt.
redemption.
Yeah, because she's the type of person that really, guilt isn't something that will motivate her to act unless it's like, okay, I feel guilty about this thing. I genuinely want to try and fix it.
Yeah.
Like just feeling guilty isn't gonna, but out of that feeling of like, actually, no, I want to fix things with you. I don't want to just wipe this even though I'm not saying it with words, my actions are going to be progressive to try and I realized that because she was kind of cautious at first and slowly progressed things as I let her in. She didn't force. And that's why I realized, okay, cool, this one, she's really trying.
Yeah.
And I think
just feel like that behavior is common in abusive relationships though. It's like,
it's been
I'm not saying your mum.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
But you get the abuser and they don't want to apologize, but their actions are all grand because you're there. They don't want to let you go. They might be controlling. They might be trying to manipulate you. It could be guilt, or it could be from a place of retribution, like you said.
Yeah.
But it's just very common in abusive relationships. And most of us were in abusive relationships with our parents, but we can't actually admit that to ourselves.
I hear what you're saying, and I don't think you're entirely wrong. However, when you look at the hallmarks of certain abusive relationships, the consistency is whereby, okay, they've realized that they've done something that's very, very abusive. Said person who's been being abused withdraws, they bring about a change in, mindset, or no, let me rephrase, a change in actions. However, it never lasts. And that's actually one of the main hallmarks of what it is to be in an abusive relationship, whereby, they hurt you, they're like, oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to, and then for a while, everything's crisp and gravy. Then it lulls the abused into a false sense of security, and then the abuser does the shit again and again and again. I hear where you're coming from. I really, really do. But I don't necessarily think that I'm not so sure how much it applies into the dynamic between parents and their children. It certainly does have some relevance, and it definitely draws similar comparisons. But I don't necessarily think it's the exact same thing. Make no mistake.
I'm not saying it's the exact same thing.
Yeah. No, I agree.
It's two different dynamics.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying.
I disagree. I think it is the same thing. I think it is. I think because from you saying it,
depending on your abuse, you could be right.
Yeah, but from you like laying that foundation and from you fleshing it out, but trying to move away from it, really, yeah, for me, it's just like it is the same thing. Because if,
we don't want to admit that our parents were abusive.
Like if you think about it, the point you're bringing up of like it never lasts. I'm lucky that in the case of my mum, genuinely, nothing that she used to do, she does.
Do you think it
didn't like it progressed? It lasted. But and I think the thing for that was my stubbornness. Again, discipline, but learning it out of, I guess, a lack of, in a sense. Because the discipline was there, but it wasn't disciplining me to learn those things. It was just suffering, like pain.
No, I hear you. I feel that.
But in what you're saying, so to make the point, I feel like it's the same because for a lot of us, our parents aren't stopping what they're doing. Mm-hmm. They're like transforming what it looks like or changing how often they do it to us.
Yeah.
But are they actually stopping it? That's the thing.
The abuse still
and I think so in
way.
you saying that, it made me realize actually no, a lot of the time it feels like it's stopped, but it's not like the same. It's the same question that they're saying differently or things like that.
Yeah.
And then if we take that into account, then it is an abusive relationship that many people
to a large degree, I feel like to a degree sometimes parental age kicks in as well, because for some people who have like older Nigerian, well, obviously obviously we're all Nigerians, so I can only speak from our perspective. Certain older Nigerian parents, because they're so stuck in their ways, even when you actually present a argument to let them know that, you know what you did back in the day was actually mad. Like, I remember a time when I was in secondary school, I must have been in year 7, and I think my mum at the time thought I had done something that I didn't, and genuinely, I actually didn't do it, and I got my ass whooped so much that I defo lied and said that I did.
I've been there.
Nah, big man thing. Like, I actually got battered, and I defo capped and said, yeah, I did it, but I actually knew for a fact that I didn't, and I lived with that for at least a decade. I will never forget, because even times when I used to think about it, I used to think, like, I've actually been through it. And then when I actually spoke to my mum about that particular incident, she was genuinely shocked, and B, she was genuinely sorry. But I do agree with what Tolu said, in the sense of sometimes certain aspects of abuse, it doesn't necessarily change, it evolves. And I think a big part of that is because parents eventually have to reach and acknowledge the fact that you can't just be whooping your child anyhow willy-nilly, because now they are bigger than you. They can actually break your head if you're not careful, especially depending on the type of child that you have. And I think one of the biggest issues that a lot of African parents face is that they don't know how to make that transition from being a dictator in their child's life to being an advisor in their child's life to just becoming a friend. Because eventually when you hit a certain age, there are certain, and also at the same time, and this is what they don't get, is that we start to see them less and less as, these great parents of ours, and we just start to see them as people. And the same kind of flaws that we sometimes see in ourselves, we actually end up seeing in them. We're just like, it's not actually that you're actually a bad person. You just clearly have some deep-rooted issues that we fully couldn't appreciate back then because we were young. But now that we're older and we see, so like sometimes you may flag up certain things about how your parents can be quite dismissive of certain things, right? So maybe you're talking about something and they're just like, forget that one, you're a child, right? But then sometimes you see them when you're older and you see how they interact with other people, and they're actually still low-key just as flippant or nonchalant. And it's kind of like, this isn't just, you were doing this because it was me talking. This is actually a character. This is actually a personality trait of yours.
And then what do you choose to do? Do you call them out, or do you just observe?
All the time. all the time. I feel like with me as well. Like obviously, I'm the youngest of 4 innit, and
I don't want to stereotype, but I feel like you're not doing the heavy lifting.
No.
Some of us.
Do you know what?
Some of us were the punching bag when they didn't know how to wear glove, and they're just
which is absolutely fair. And trust me, I definitely get where you're coming from, and I'm not gonna stunt as if to a certain degree I wasn't spoiled. I won't cap. To a degree, I was. With that being said, I got my ass kicked. I definitely got my ass kicked. And for a fair amount, was it justified? Yes. Was it arguably excessive? Yes.
Sorry, it was justified.
In the sense of like me being punished, yes. But the excessive use of force for what I'd actually done, nah. That's what I mean by that. But even then, like amongst like my siblings, I'd probably say I'm the probably boisterous one. I'm the loud one. I'm the one that won't shut up. If I disagree with something, I will say to you, I don't agree. I don't. And to a degree, like I love my siblings, and Stefan, I there are times when I actively clash with them because it's for them, like they see these things like, oh, this is the right thing to do. I'm just gonna like, do I really agree with that? I don't really know. I don't think so. And sometimes it causes friction, but it's inevitable, you know. So with my mum, for example, sometimes if there are certain things that I don't agree with, or certain things that she may say, before, for the sake of keeping the peace, quote unquote, I wouldn't say anything. But the older I'm just like, what's gonna happen now? If I might as well say my piece so you can know that this is where I stand on this particular thing in terms of what you've said. And I want you to know that I do not like it. Because if I don't say anything, it's that saying of, I say this thing to a lot of my mates, is I can't always be the person that will tell you what you want to hear. But I will always be the person that will tell you what you need to hear. And you may not always like when I tell you what you need to hear. But understand that when I tell you what you need to hear, know that it never comes from a place of malice, but from a place of love. So when I say what I say to you, and I've clocked this certain aspect of behavior within you, and I'm like, oh yeah, mum, what you said here wasn't good. Or, oh mum, yeah, maybe you could have said this. And, you know, she might be like, oh, what do you mean? I said, oh mum, like, try and look at it from, and this is one of those things of especially when you get older as well, and your parents are getting older, you then start to realize that, you know what, Loki, you actually need me, you know. You deep it because the dynamic over a period starts to change. Your parents are managing you, and then you start to manage your parents.
Did you grow up with both of them?
Yes and no. So my dad lived in Niger and was sending money over and so on and so forth.
Same.
It's interesting how we're saying mum,
like
so much. Yeah. And I'm thinking, wait, did our dads not discipline us?
That's actually a thing. My dad was probably, I think that's where I realized my problem isn't discipline. It's just the style. Because even with my mum, I understood the purpose behind, like, essentially the
overarching.
I've been socialized to believe that if I love my child, then I would do this to my child. So I can understand someone coming from a perspective of that, because it's like
also a different different error as well.
Because I feel like it's a bit vapid to believe that someone's perspective began at them.
Yeah,
like, because that's not the truth for us. So why do? But taking those things into consideration was like, cool. But with my mum, I just understood. Yeah, the way you're doing what you're doing doesn't even allow you to use. Let's say this is your approach. Fine, it doesn't even allow you to get the best out of it, because you're not really using it, you're reacting with it. But with my dad, I really got to understand, and probably had a handful of interactions that were disciplinary. But the way he would approach things, it was literally sit you down and be like, okay, cool, why did you do this? And if you have nothing to say, that's where you'll both be sat until you figure out why you did it. Or you search yourself, even if you don't know, cool, then why are you doing things that you don't know? And then you actually go through it, and it gives you a chance to actually, for me, every single conversation will make me feel like, why did I actually do that? No, man, I can't believe I did that. It was so awkward. Why was that? And then really go back into my room and start asking myself, why did I actually do that? I shouldn't do that.
Scared of your dad?
No. There was one time, I was probably like 14 or 15. I never felt like he was gonna hit me. I felt like if this guy sits me down and starts talking, I know I'm gonna feel it. So whenever he sat me down, I was always willing to sit down because I would probably know like, okay, cool, yeah, we have to have some type of talk. I have to sit down. What do I mean willing? But
you talking like you got a choice in this boy, man, like what?
But that's one thing that in me, I wasn't afraid of pain. I was afraid of disappointing him. I was afraid of like if I did something and someone said, "Oh, I'm gonna tell your mum," it's like, "Oh man, she's gonna beat me." But if I did something and someone said, "I'm gonna tell your dad," it's like, "Oh, I don't want him to think I'm bad. I care about what
so
like, I care about."
That's very interesting.
For me, that was a bigger push because in my mind it was like, that's a positive as well. It's like, okay, cool. Doing positive things will impress this positive person in my life. Fine. But with this person, there's a negative attached to doing positive things. Like you've created a negative reinforcement loop.
Yeah.
And your dad never beat you.
So there was one time where I can't remember what I did, but I crossed the line. I think I were chilling with my white friends too much and came home with a little bit of freedom. My mum wasn't even home. Siblings weren't home. It was just me and my dad. We were just chilling. And definitely got too big for my boots. I can't remember what I did, but I think I might have told him to F off. Never before in my life have I done that. And to be fair, he has never given me a reason to. And on that day, he probably didn't. And I just remember this guy's face changed like that. And on that day, I was like, okay, cool. Yeah, you're peaceful by choice. Cool. Like, and I remember on that day, I still didn't get beats because the moment I saw that, the speed at which he reached for me, I just dodged, ran downstairs, ran into the kitchen, into the garden, hopped the fence, went to the park, chilled off for 2 hours. That's how frightening that change of. And for me,
D for what? Dasheen.
For me personally, I would rather have that impact because it wasn't embedded in fear. Like when I came back to the house, I wasn't like I was tempted.
In hindsight, though,
even in the moment, I was afraid of what I had awoken, but I wasn't afraid of my dad. Whereas with my mum, I was definitely afraid of my mum. Definitely. There's definitely times where like she'll just be standing next to me. I'm just like, oh, if this woman asks me about my homework now, this night is over. But if my dad could ask me the same thing about my homework and I know, okay, cool, we're going to have a conversation. I might end up doing my homework, but my night, I'm not afraid of what that interaction is going to turn into. After that day, I came back after the 2 hours, apologized. And he was just like, no, I'm sorry. Because I shouldn't have gone off at that speed. But this is why you can never, ever, ever try me on this line again. Fair. That's the one time almost. Apart from that, he's never put a hand on me that I can remember in my conscious memory. Never, ever. But because his discipline style is exactly, I feel like that's what discipline is, right? You're teaching people responsible boundaries to have.
Yeah.
And you're teaching them the value of sticking to your boundaries.
Yeah.
And I think if you're beating someone to do that, you're a terrible teacher. And I think it's okay. It's okay to start off as a terrible teacher. You didn't do a PGCE. No one's taught you how to be a teacher. So you're going to be a terrible teacher at the beginning. That's okay. The problem is when it's cultural to do terrible teaching practices.
Yeah.
And then because of that, there's no provocation for you to go and learn how to be a good teacher. And then you use that as an excuse to just be a terrible teacher.
And it's so interesting about that because I've got friends, for example, who don't speak to their parents. I've got quite a few mates actually who like they have borderline no interaction with their parents. I'm talking they've had kids and their kids ain't met their grandparents. Like it is that deep. It really, really is. And like,
I get it.
and you know what? To a large degree, I do get it because it's that whole thing of being stuck in your ways and refusing to I always say this thing of if you don't know how to hold yourself accountable for the things that you do, nobody else can, because you can't even, to a large degree, look at yourself objectively or be able to actually just apply basic empathy and try and see something from a different point of view. And many, I don't want to generalize, but I have noticed this trend within a lot of my friends that don't speak to their parents or don't have a relationship with their parents. it's because of that particular thing. When you have a lot of kids that of children that are trying to identify things with their parents in terms of excessive use of force, verbal abuse, emotional abuse, and verbal abuse is something that is actually way more common in African households than many people want to admit. They downplay it as, oh, banter, oh yeah, that's just how they are. But it is verbal abuse, and it does have a knock-on effect. Not only does it have a knock-on effect to a degree on your self-esteem and psyche, it also to a degree actually has an effect on the way you interact with other people. And by that I mean in the sense of perhaps A, potentially with your own children, should it come to that, or B, in relationships. And we're not just talking in terms of relationships of, a romantic relationship, even platonic relationships with your friends. Mm-hmm. If you've grown up in a household where everyone is always talking reckless, chances are you're going to be talking reckless. And because it's been happening so consistently, it creeps into your mind as the norm. And for a lot of my mates who don't have relationships with their parents anymore, a large part of that is because they've grown up, they've been able to actually sit down, look back in hindsight and realize that, this is actually what you did in this regard was abusive. What you did in this regard actually hurt me and has had certain ramifications on me in the way that I react to certain things and the way that I interact with other individuals. But then when you try and explain it to them, parents will sometimes look at you like you're speaking Chinese, bruv. They look at you like that. Like, what are you saying right now? What are you saying? And it's a fundamental lack of empathy and not being able to be accountable. Mm-hmm. And I like to think that those practices and mindsets for me personally, I like to believe that when I have kids, I don't want to beat my kids. I don't. Like, in terms of what you said with your dad and how he interacted with you, like, that's ideally the blueprint I want to have with my kids. Like, I'm not gonna lie. Can you not see this hand? This hand can clear somebody's face with power. Like, I don't want to have to be giving someone busa to one of my kids and then they're looking at me like, this guy needs to die. No, because it's true. It's true. Like, there are certain encounters that you have with your parents, right? Like, so like, even for example, like with the whole thing of like having parents, like, you know, one parent lives abroad and you live with the other one. I don't want that. I genuinely don't. Because for most of my formative years, I grew up primarily with my mum. Do you get what I'm saying? And of course, my parents are still happily married, so it's not even an issue of like, whether or not it's because they're divorced or whatever. But he was living in Nigeria. I can't lie. I'm not trying to have that with my kids. I want myself and my wife, you know, princess, find me. You know, I want us to ideally actually literally have a united front and be. Because here's the thing, right? I want to be able to have a healthy balance. I want my child to have a healthy balance of both. You want to be able to have the ability to be, you know, emotionally available, not hesitate to be vulnerable, and having that emotional intelligence and availability that a mother can provide, but also have the actual sense of, you know, discipline in terms of, you know what, acknowledge your position as a man, know what it is, you know, that you need to do, what you should do, and so on and so forth. And, be able to accordingly have that balance. You know, for me, for example, for many years, like the first time I met my dad was when I was 5, 6. Do you get it? Like, and a big part of that, and that was through a myriad of different factors. So it's not like it's a case of like he chose to stay there and so on and so forth. But there are lots of different factors that came into that. And I could actually say that my relationship with my dad for a long time, and I remember I said this to my mum once, that I don't really feel like dad gets me. And a large part of that was because I didn't really all I know of is you as dad. You're my dad. You made me. That's it. But I didn't really have that bond with my pops. Like, obviously, regarding, for example, everything that's been happening in Nigeria at the moment, I called my dad. If you said to me like 10 years ago, I would be calling my dad to check up on him and, you know, having that emotion, being able to be vulnerable with my dad and being able to have these discussions and so on and so forth, I would have punched you up. I would have slapped you and said, you are a dirty, stinking liar. But I'm calling my dad, checking up on him, worried about him. You know, are you okay? How's everything going? You know, do you have this? Do you have that? Me and him, you know, I can speak to my dad about advice, that things that I know that I couldn't speak to my mum about. And I can actually get that kind of advice now. But back then, I didn't. And a part of that was because I feel like me and him were fundamentally different people. Like, when you're fundamentally raised by one, like, to a degree by a parent, my mum is someone who is quite emotional, innit? So I get a lot of my emotionally outgoing behavior from her. My dad is quite a logical man. Logic and emotion, when they're low-key on two different ends of the spectrum, it's very hard to find common ground when dealing with that. But as I got older and I realized that you need to have a balance of emotional availability and being emotionally charged as well as being logically inclined, when you're able to strike that fine balance, and it's not an easy thing to attain, by the way. And if you pre it sometimes, and you look at certain, when you look at the dynamics of quite a few parents, one tends to be very emotional, one tends to be very loud and boisterous, one tends to be more quiet. Think about it. Like, with certain parents, one is very emotional, one is loud, with the other one is quite quiet. It's always like, I've noticed this with a lot, actually, with quite a few of my mates, in terms of their parents. One is always on one kind of end, and one is always on the other, and then somehow they come together and it works. So in that regard, yeah, definitely.
Does it actually work? But that's a topic for another day.
I've got two questions.
Go on.
With the first one being, do you feel like the us being Nigerian, do you feel like the traditional or the normal parenting style that we were subjected to, do you think that is what disciplined you, or do you think you disciplined yourself as a result of that?
Definitely the latter. Because if you whooped my ass, I'll just be looking at you like, or then once I know how it was back in the day, I'll be getting my ass beat. I'll be there looking in the mirror. I'm gonna run away, and all that kind of stuff. But then I think when I looked past the, get my ass and I actually looked at what they were actually trying to say and get out of my things and actually look at the overarching, I realized, okay, you know what? You lot definitely took the piss in the way you lot beat me, but I would be bugging if I didn't understand why you were vexed at what I did based on a myriad of different factors and what I need to do as an individual to make better choices and not do that kind of particular thing again. I don't think beating actually made me change.
I mean, by definition, it was discipline.
Yeah, but no.
By the definition,
by the definition, yes. But I think what it was as well,
it was application of force.
It was an application of force.
Definition.
No. But you know what it is though? It's subjective, and that's the fundamental thing. It's subjective. Their application of force was what they viewed as synonymous with discipline. Now that doesn't necessarily mean it was right, but because again, like we've rightly acknowledged, they raised us the way that they were raised, and arguably potentially more diluted because it was potentially worse for them. So
it says train to obey rules of a code of behavior or using punishment to correct disobedience. So punishment, by definition.
Punishment also doesn't strictly mean application of force. So beating,
yeah,
and punishment are not synonymous.
But it's still a form of discipline.
Agreed.
I agree with what you're saying there, but I don't know if we've got time.
I'm not gonna lie. If we carry on doing this thing, we are gonna use all the studio time.
You know what? We're gonna have to do a part two.
We're gonna have to do a part two. And I
liked where it went.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I feel like, just as a summary, I feel like there are so many different, as much as things are very much different, the ways that we've grown up, we can all agree quite similar. But I'd like to think, as the kind of individuals that we are, especially being in a society whereby we can see beyond that and actually look for other potentially better ways to be able to have better, healthier relationships with our own children. And obviously I know, Tolly, that you've got a young boy, so I know that perhaps in many ways, in terms of the way you were brought up, in terms of, physical, being beaten and so on and so forth, that's probably something that you don't want to apply with your kids. Ideally, you want to be able to have a rapport with them and a strong bond with them that you don't come across as a dictator. It's that whole thing of I'm right, you're wrong. Do as I say, not as I do. Don't question me. And it's that cultural aspect that I think to a degree is quite toxic, and I think it's something that can definitely change with our generation.
Do you think our culture lies to us a lot? This is a topic for another day. So.
Word. But thanks to everyone for tuning in today. Much appreciated. Please continue to follow the Goodman Factory podcast. We are everywhere on Instagram, Twitter. Do we have SoundCloud? Yeah, we even have SoundCloud too, so you can use it on any form. Spotify, we're all on there. Just to also, again, as usual, please do not hesitate to look on our website for the various products relating to, hair and grooming that we provide. Please also don't hesitate to use the 10% discount code of GPOD1. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for listening once again to the Goodman Factory Experience. Deuces. We out. Skirt.